500 years before Columbus ever raised a sail, a Viking longship crossed the cold grey waters of the North Atlantic and touched the shores of a new world. The man at its helm was no myth. He was the son of an outlaw, the grandson of an outlaw, and a sailor so favoured by fortune that his own people called him Leif the Lucky. This is the true saga of Leif Erikson, the first European to set foot in North America. To understand Leif, you must first understand his family, because the Eriksons did not come to the edge of the world by choice. They were driven there. Leif's grandfather, Thorvald, was banished from Norway for killing a man. He fled west to Iceland with his young son, Erik, a boy with flaming red hair and a temper to match. History would remember him as Erik the Red. Erik grew into a man every bit as dangerous as his father. In Iceland, a feud with his neighbours turned bloody, and Erik was declared an outlaw, banished for 3 years. Most men would have sailed somewhere safe. Erik the Red sailed toward Aruma, a land glimpsed far to the west, beyond the sea ice, that no man had ever explored. Erik spent his 3 years of exile charting that frozen coastline, and when his banishment ended, he returned to Iceland with a plan and a masterstroke of salesmanship. He called his discovery Greenland, because, as the sagas admit, he believed men would be far more eager to go there if the land had an attractive name. It may be the oldest marketing trick in history, and it worked. In the year 985, Erik led a fleet of 25 ships packed with settlers, livestock, and everything needed to build a new life. Only 14 ships survived the crossing. But a colony took root on those green fjords at the edge of the glaciers, and it was here, in this farthest outpost of the known world, that Leif Erikson was born and raised. Leif grew up in Brattahlid, his father's estate, in a world of ice and open water. The sagas describe him as tall, strong, wise, and even-tempered, everything his hot-headed father was not. Like all Greenlanders, he learned to read the wind, the waves, and the stars, because in a land with no forests and short summers, survival itself depended on the sea. As a young man, Leif made the long voyage east to Norway, to the court of King Olaf Tryggvason, one of the most forceful kings the North had ever known. Olaf was a former Viking raider who had converted to Christianity, and he was determined to bring the new faith to every corner of the Norse world, by persuasion when possible, and by sword when it was not. Leif spent the winter in the king's hall, and there he was converted and baptized a Christian. When spring came, King Olaf gave him a mission: return to Greenland and bring the faith to the settlers there. Leif agreed and sailed west, carrying a priest, the new religion, and a place in history he did not yet know was waiting for him. Now, here the old sources tell 2 different stories. In one saga, Leif is blown wildly off course on that very voyage home and stumbles upon an unknown coast by pure accident. But the older and more trusted account, the saga of the Greenlanders, tells it differently. And that version begins with another sailor entirely, a merchant named Bjarni Hergolfsson. Some 15 years earlier, Bjarni had been sailing to Greenland to visit his father, when a storm and thick fog swallowed his ship. When the sky finally cleared, he saw a coastline that matched nothing he had ever heard described, low hills covered in thick forest. Bjarni knew it was not Greenland, and incredibly, he refused to land. He turned north and sailed away. Bjarni made it home, and men mocked him for his lack of curiosity. But his story spread through every hall in Greenland, a land of trees, southwest across the water. And in a colony where timber was more precious than silver, that rumor was worth a fortune. Around the year 1000, Leif decided someone was finally going to find that land. He bought Bjarni's own ship, gathered a crew of 35 men, and asked his father to lead the expedition. But as old Erik the Red rode down to the ship, his horse stumbled and threw him. Erik took it as an omen. "It is not fated for me to discover more lands than this one," he said. The voyage would be Leif's alone. Leif sailed Bjarni's route in reverse. The first land he reached was a place of flat stone slabs beneath towering glaciers. No grass, no trees, no life. Leif named it Helluland, the land of flat stones. Most historians believe this was Baffin Island in the Canadian Arctic. He pressed on south. Next came a low coastline of white sand beaches backed by dense forest. Leif called it Markland, the forest land, almost certainly the coast of Labrador. To Greenlanders who had never seen a true forest, it must have looked like treasure growing wild. But Leif was not finished. 2 more days at sea, and they came to a place that seemed almost enchanted. An island where dew on the grass tasted sweet as honey. A river teeming with salmon, larger than any they had ever seen. Meadows of wild grass, winters so mild that cattle could graze outdoors, and days far longer than the brief winter sun of Greenland. The crew built shelters and decided to stay the winter. And then came the discovery that gave the land its name. One evening, a member of the crew went missing, a German named Tyrke, who had been like a foster father to Leif since childhood. Leif went out with a search party, fearing the worst. They found Tyrke wandering back toward camp, wild with excitement, babbling in German. When he finally calmed down, he explained. He had found grapevines and wild grapes, something he knew well from his homeland. Grapes meant wine, and wine, in the Norse world, was the drink of kings. Leif named the country Vinland, the land of wine. His men spent the winter cutting timber and gathering vines and grapes, a full cargo of riches to carry home across the sea. On the return voyage to Greenland, Leif spotted something on a reef, 15 shipwrecked sailors clinging to the rocks. He rescued every one of them and salvaged their cargo. It was this act, as much as his discoveries, that earned him his famous name. From that day on, he was Leif the Lucky. Leif never returned to Vinland. His father died soon after, and Leif became chieftain of the Greenland colony, a duty he could not abandon. But his family carried on the adventure. His brother Thorvald sailed to Vinland next, and there made history of a darker kind, the first recorded battle between Europeans and Native Americans, a skirmish that cost Thorvald his life. Later, the explorer Thorfinn Karlsefni led a full colonizing expedition, and his wife Gudrid gave birth in Vinland to a son named Snorri, the first European child born in the Americas. But the settlers were few, and the native peoples whom the Norse called Skraelings were many. After years of trading and fighting, the Norse gave up Vinland and sailed home for good. For 900 years, the sagas were the only evidence, and many scholars dismissed Vinland as pure legend. Then, in 1960, the Norwegian explorer Helge Ingstad and his wife, archaeologist Anne Stein Ingstad, began digging at a place called Lance o' Meadows on the northern tip of Newfoundland. What they found silenced the doubters forever. The remains of 8 Norse buildings, iron nails, a bronze cloak-pin, and a spindle whorl, all dated to around the year 1000, exactly when the sagas said Leif made his voyage. The site is now a World Heritage Site, physical proof that the Vikings reached America 5 centuries before Columbus. Leif himself lived out his days as the respected chieftain of Greenland, and when he died, around the year 1020, his title passed to his son. Today, his statue stands in Iceland, in Norway, and across the United States, and every 9th of October, America officially celebrates Leif Erikson Day. Leif Erikson was not a conqueror. He burned no villages and took no slaves. He was an explorer in the truest sense, a man who heard a rumor of land beyond the horizon and simply went to see it. The son of outlaws became the first European in the New World, and fortune followed him so faithfully that his name still carries it, 1,000 years later, Leif the Lucky. This has been the saga of Leif Erikson, the Viking who found America and sailed home again. If you enjoyed this voyage into history, there are more sagas waiting. Thank you for watching.